Ethan chose our wedding anniversary to do it. 10 years. There were candles, the expensive restaurant in Tribeca he always loved to show off, and a wine so expensive its very aroma smelled of guilt. Eleanor, merely observed the play. I had been a consummate actress for the last 2 years. Tonight was just the final act of the first act. Eleanor, honey, we need to talk about something serious, he said, setting down his glass. His tone was smooth, rehearsed, as if he were about to announce a failed investment. No, the end of our world. Tell me, Ethan. I'm listening, I replied, taking a small sip of water. I wasn't interested in the wine. I needed a clear head. He let out a theatrical sigh. This isn't working anymore. Us. We've grown in different directions. You know it as well as I do. Different directions, I repeated, keeping my voice neutral. Interesting way to put it. He ignored the comment. I've thought a lot about this to make it as clean and quick as possible, and above all, for Valentina's stability, I propose the following. He paused, making sure he had my full attention. I get everything. The house in Greenwich, the penthouse on the Upper East Side, the shares in the company, the investment accounts, everything. You get to be free, unattached, you can start over. The silence stretched between us. It wasn't one of shock, but of anticipation. I had mentally rehearsed this hundreds of times. So far, everything was according to the script. And Valentina? I asked, locking my eyes on his. A quick shadow of discomfort crossed his face. Then the mask of the reasonable man slipped back into place. She is the most important thing. But look at the reality, Eleanor. You haven't been well lately. That history of downturns. I have a stable home. The resources to give her the best education, the best schools. It would be selfish of you to drag her into uncertainty. I'll take care of her. You can see her, of course, when it's convenient. There it was. He not only wanted the loot, he wanted to snatch our daughter from me, using my visits to the therapist. Those sessions he had insisted I needed to overcome my apathy as a weapon. Rage, an old friend, began to stir, but I smothered it under a slab of polished ice. So that's your proposal, I said, my voice strangely calm. You take everything the fruit of our 10-year partnership. It's not taking everything, Eleanor, he corrected with a hint of impatience. It's simplifying. It's avoiding a dirty war that would only hurt Valentina. You sign, you leave, and we can all move on. I'll take on all the responsibilities. It's the fairest thing to do. Fair. The word echoed hollowly in my head, like the sound of a nail being hammered into a coffin. 2 years ago, that word would have made me explode. 2 years ago, the discovery of those first emails on his laptop, the messages to Chloe, his partner in that import business, had shattered me. But the sharp pain had transformed with time and fierce patience into something else, into a plan. All right, Ethan, I said, and the smile that appeared on his lips was wide, genuine, the smile of a hunter who thinks he's bagged his prey without effort. I'll sign it. Everything as you say for Valentina, so it's clean. His relief was palpable. He extended his hand across the tablecloth as if to touch mine, but held back. You're reasonable. You always were. I knew you'd understand. Oh, I understand perfectly, I whispered. He paid the bill with his platinum card, the one in both our names. We drove back to the house in Greenwich in silence. He drove with a lightness he hadn't shown in months. I looked out the window at the illuminated skyline of Manhattan, a city that suddenly felt alien and yet full of possibilities. Upon arriving, he went straight to his study, probably to call Chloe and give her the great news. I stayed in the kitchen, huge and cold like an exhibition hall. I waited. The ticking of the wall clock marked the rhythm of my new life. When the house was completely silent, I took out my phone, a cheap prepaid device I bought from different delis every 2 months. There was only one number saved. I dialed it. He answered on the second ring. Yeah. Frank's voice was rough, direct. He wasn't my lawyer. He was something better. He was my detective, my shadow, my archivist of betrayals. It was tonight, I said without preamble. Everything as we expected. He wants the house, the apartments, the accounts, the company, and Valentina. He's using my therapy sessions as leverage. Frank snorted on the other end of the line. The son of a bitch. He's got no shame. And you? I've accepted. I said yes to everything. A brief silence followed. I could almost hear his old wolf's grin. Perfect. He's swallowing it hook, line, and sinker. Mark is going to have a heart attack when you tell him you don't even want to fight for the doormat. Mark was my official lawyer, a well-intentioned but conventional man who believed my depression had me defeated. He knew nothing about Frank or about Jessica, my other lawyer, the one who worked in the shadows. Let him have one, I said coldly. It's necessary for the show. And the other matter, the account in Andorra, ready. The movements are all documented. The payments to that phantom consulting firm of Chloe's, the transfers from the company account to his personal one. It all adds up. And I have the key document. The loan. My pulse quickened. Signed and sealed 18 months ago. In your name from a bank in Liechtenstein with the assets of the other company as collateral. The one he doesn't know exists. It's yours, Eleanor. All legal, impeccable, and out of his reach. A tingle of pure power of deferred justice ran down my spine. For 2 years, while Ethan thought I was sinking into melancholy, I had been digging into his finances, his lies, his parallel life. With the discreet help of Frank, a retired cop with few scruples and a keen sense of vengeance, and Jessica, a lawyer specializing in taking arrogant men to the cleaners. I had built a legal and financial labyrinth he didn't even know the entrance to. I didn't have downturns, I had appointments. I wasn't crying to a therapist, I was studying reports. While he and Chloe played lovers and partners siphoning funds from their own company with the greed of amateurs, I was rebuilding my fortune brick by brick in a place he would never look. Good. I took a deep breath. Then we begin. Tomorrow I'll call Mark and give him the news. I want to see Ethan's face when he signs at the notary and thinks he's hit the jackpot. Be careful, Eleanor. Frank warned, his voice more serious. The most dangerous moment is when the prey thinks it's safe. Don't underestimate his pride. If he feels tricked, he could be unpredictable. He won't feel tricked, I said, looking towards the dark hallway that led to my daughter's room. He'll feel like the smartest man in the room until the day he stops feeling anything. Until then, let him enjoy his victory. It will be his last. I hung up. I leaned against the cold marble countertop. In the reflection of the black window, my own image stared back. I was no longer the Eleanor from 2 years ago, the wounded woman who cried in silence. That woman was dead, replaced by another one with dry eyes and a plan that was above all a promise. The house, the money, the titles, he could have it all. He was just guarding the ashes. The fire, what truly mattered, was already safe with me. And soon, very soon, Valentina would be too. The game had begun, and he didn't even know he'd already made his first move, and that it was the wrong one. It was the forgotten laptop that started it all. 2 years ago, Ethan had rushed out to an emergency meeting with Chloe. A theatrical call, a grave voice, a furrowed brow. Eleanor handed him his briefcase while he cursed the traffic. The laptop, his old MacBook, peeked out from under a pile of papers on the entryway table. He didn't usually take it. He had a newer one at the office. I was about to put it away in his study when it blinked. An email notification on the lock screen. A preview. Ethan Honey, the numbers don't add up. I've moved the stuff from the island account. Check the attached file. C. The email address c.vidal@atlanticsolutions.us. Chloe Vidal, his partner, the dynamic entrepreneur who had rescued the import side of Ethan's family business, the same one who at the last company dinner had adjusted his tie with a familiarity that chilled my blood. It wasn't a sudden outburst. It was something slower, denser, a grey fog seeping into my veins. I set the laptop on the table. My mind, clouded for months by a listlessness he called late-onset postpartum apathy, was suddenly ice-cold clear. My password, the usual one, the one for all our shared devices. Valentina. 2013, our daughter's birth date. The laptop unlocked, a dry click like the lid of a coffin. I didn't have to dig much. The browser was open, the Gmail session logged in. It wasn't his main account, it was another one. Ethan. Private. mgmt@gmail.com. A man so careful, so obsessed with control, making the rookie mistake of laziness. The emails were a manual of infidelity and fraud. Chloe's were filled with ardor mixed with financial jargon. Last night was incredible. Your wife doesn't suspect a thing, does she? From what you say, she's too depressed to notice anything. Another. The transfer to the Cayman account is done. I used the fake invoice from the Swiss consulting firm. Your wonderful wife signed the authorization without looking. She's still so lost, poor thing. And there it was, my scanned signature on a document authorizing a payment of $85,000 to Helvetic Consulting Group. I remembered that paper. Ethan had put it in front of me one tired night while Valentina was crying with a fever. It's for the accounting software renewal, honey. Sign here, it's urgent. And I, with my mind on my daughter, signed. I looked down the empty hallway. The silence of the house was absolute, just the hum of the laptop. And then something broke. It wasn't my heart. It was something colder, more structural. The illusion, the trust, the love shattered. And in the void, it left something new began to grow, a silent, sharp determination. I didn't get hysterical. I didn't touch anything. I took out my phone and took pictures, many pictures of every email, every attachment, every bank statement with accounts in places with paradise-like names. Then with surgical care, I closed everything. I put the laptop exactly where it was. I sat on the couch and waited. Ethan returned 3 hours later, smelling of expensive cologne and feigned fatigue. A disaster, Ellie. Those idiots can't do anything without me. I smiled at him. You must be exhausted, honey. Want a drink? As I poured the Macallan, my hands didn't tremble. My mind was a field of ice. I had crossed a threshold. I was no longer the cheated wife. I was a strategist. The next day, after dropping Valentina at school, I went to a cyber cafe in the East Village. I created a new email account with a random name and searched Private Investigators NYC, discretion. Frank Durano didn't have a flashy website. He had a single line in a directory of specialized services, corporate and asset investigations, low profile. I called from a payphone. Yeah. His voice sounded as rough as sandpaper. I need to verify a few things about my business partner, I said, hesitating deliberately. And what things would you like to verify, Mrs. Eleanor? I said, using my real name. Frankness is sometimes the best lie. I want to verify if he's stealing from me. And with whom? There was a silence. Proof. Do you have anything? I have pictures of emails, transfers, invoices I signed without knowing. Bring what you have. Tomorrow at 11. Commercial diner corner booth on the left. I'll have a newspaper. Frank was a man in his 60s, with a suit that was a little too big and eyes that didn't seem to blink. I passed him an envelope with copies of the photos. He looked at them unhurriedly over a whole cup of coffee. "Your partner is a lucky amateur," he said at last, putting down the photos. "But a dangerous one. He's siphoning funds, and that woman Chloe, she's not much smarter. This smells of tax fraud, misappropriation, maybe even small-scale money laundering. But it's there. What do I do?" My voice sounded smaller than I wanted. He looked at me directly. "That depends on you, Mrs. Eleanor. Do you want to cry, or do you want to win?" The question hung over the marble tabletop. "I want to win," I said, and the words tasted like truth, like metal. "But not just in court. I want it so that when this is all over, he has nothing. Nothing of what he thinks is his." A slow, almost imperceptible smile formed on Frank's lips. "That's more expensive and slower, and it requires you to act differently." "Explain?" "Right now, you are a wounded, depressed woman. Keep being that for him for the world. But here with me and with the person I'm going to recommend, you will be ice. You will learn, you will sign. Where we tell you, you will transfer what you can, little by little. We will build a web outside his reach, and we will wait for him to get cocky, for him to believe everything is secure, and make his big mistake. Greed always stumbles. And then," he said, folding the envelope, "then we pull the rug out from under him, and the floor, and the foundations. That's how I met Jessica Montes, young, impeccably dressed, with a razor-sharp intellect. Her office in a discreet building in Midtown East didn't have the glamour of Ethan's law firms. It had file folders and a computer screen filled with numbers. "Frank brought me up to speed," she said without preamble. "Your situation is classic. Husband with joint assets, but opaque business dealings. You have signing authority, you're a co-manager on some entities. That's a double-edged sword. It can make you liable, but it also gives you power." "I don't want power. I want justice and security for my daughter. Justice is slow. Security is fast if you know how." She opened a folder. "I need you to give me access to everything. Tax returns for the last 5 years, deeds, company bylaws, everything. And from now on at home, I need you to be a wilted flower, weak, uninterested in money. And my daughter, Valentina." Jessica looked at me, and for the first time her expression softened by a millimeter. "She's the key. Everything we do must on paper be to protect her future. We'll create an offshore trust in her name, with discreet contributions from you that we'll siphon off. It's her shield and her inheritance no matter what happens with her father." The following months were a double game. With Ethan, I was the same old Eleanor, just a bit more subdued, a bit more distant. I started seeing a psychologist, the one he recommended. I told him my fears, my lack of energy. The doctor confirmed to Ethan in confidential terms that I was suffering from an adjustment disorder with depressive symptoms. Ethan swallowed the bait. My weakness was his comfort. Meanwhile, with Frank and Jessica, I was more alive than ever. I learned about holding companies, about accounts in Liechtenstein, about SWIFT transfers. I used my personal expenses, my wife's allowance, to start moving money. Small, unnoticeable sums to an account in the name of a foundation in Panama that Jessica controlled then to a trust for Valentina. One day, while reviewing old papers with Jessica, we found the treasure. The mistake Ethan never saw. "Eleanor, this is incredible." Jessica pointed to a clause in the bylaws of Atlantic Investments, LLC, the company he had with Chloe. "Right here. In the event of the dissolution of the marital bond of any of the partners, and if there are indications of a conflict of interest or disloyalty, the aggrieved party has the right to request the forced sale of the assets to liquidate their position, subject to the signature of both spouses." I frowned. I don't understand. It's a wife protection clause, very old school. Someone put it in years ago, maybe the original lawyer. Your husband and his lover signed it without reading, and you also signed it as the spouse and co-owner of some assets that went in as collateral. Her eyes gleamed. If we can prove Ethan's disloyalty to the company to you as an indirect interested party, we could force the sale of the company, just when he thinks it's all his. It was the first piece of the explosive. The others came later, the payments to fake suppliers. Chloe's invoices, the Andorra account where they mixed company money with personal funds. Frank watched them. I filed the evidence silently. One night, Ethan came home euphoric. We closed the big contract with the Chinese Ellie. This puts me in another league. He hugged me. He smelled of triumph and vodka. I let him hold me my cheek against his chest, where his heart beat fast with ambition not for me. I'm so happy for you, Ethan. I whispered, my voice choked. Really? And it was true. I was happy because the higher he climbed, the louder the crash would be when he fell. My revenge wouldn't be a scream. It would be a sigh. The sigh of relief from a man who thinks he's won just before he realizes he's signed his own ruin. While he dreamed of penthouses and yachts, I dreamed of a document. A loan. A huge bank loan taken out in my name, using as collateral the assets of a small company Jessica had created for me in Luxembourg. A company that was, in turn, the secret owner of some of the funds I had been siphoning off. A loan that would appear when the time was right, like a massive personal debt. A debt that, when dropped on Ethan at the right moment, would crush him. 2 years. 24 months of fake smiles and shadow moves. Until last night. Until he, in his arrogance, offered me a Mephistophelian pact. Give me everything and I'll set you free. And I said yes. Because the freedom I sought wasn't to escape him. It was to watch him fall and recover from the rubble of his ambition, the one thing that had never belonged to him, my life and my daughter's. Dr. Hayes's office was a cubicle of feigned peace. Green plants dim lighting a beige linen couch. Eleanor settled into the armchair, not the couch. Couches were for those who wanted to sink. I needed to appear vulnerable, not defeated. How has the week been, Eleanor? Dr. Hayes crossed her legs, her notepad on her knee. She was young, empathetic, and completely manipulable. Ethan's recommendation had been masterful, the best for trauma and low self-esteem. I sighed, letting my shoulders slump a millimeter. The same. Empty. Like nothing matters. Ethan says I should try harder, that Valentina needs a present mother. My voice was a thread studied to sound broken but not hysterical. Dr. Hayes nodded compassionately. That must be very hard. Your husband is still so demanding. He wants to help. He pushes me to get interested in the finances in the house. He says distracting myself with practical things will do me good. I paused, looking at my hands. But every time I see a bank statement, my heart sinks. The numbers terrify me. It was the most useful lie. I had turned my supposed phobia of finances into my best weapon. At first, Ethan tried to explain charts, balance sheets. Now, he just handed me these papers to sign. Sign here, honey, it's the usual. And I, with a trembling finger, would stamp my signature on documents that Jessica would later, in the privacy of her office, dissect with a wolfish grin. Your fear of numbers is a symptom, Eleanor, a block. Your mind associates control power with the harm you perceive, with the feeling of having lost control of your life. Dr. Hayes took notes. Notes that I was sure she summarized in reports that fed Ethan's narrative. Eleanor fragile, unable to manage stress or complex assets. Maybe you're right, I murmured. Sometimes I just want someone to take care of everything, to leave me alone. The last part was true. The session continued. I talked about my guilt for not being more vibrant, my fear of letting Valentina down. I shed a few perfect, well-timed tears. When I left my eyes slightly red, I ran into Ethan in the waiting room. It was his surprise, his way of showing what a concerned, committed husband he was. "Everything okay, love?" he asked, putting an arm around my shoulders. His touch burned me. I nodded weakly. "Yes, Dr. Hayes helps." "Of course she does, why?" he said, guiding me toward the exit. "You'll see little by little everything will go back to normal." There was a note of triumph in his voice. His broken wife was his perfect alibi, a weak being who couldn't and wouldn't fight for anything. In the car on the way home, my main phone vibrated. A pre-arranged message from Jessica. Meeting, new material. Interesting. My heart gave a different kind of jolt this time of anticipation. New material was the key phrase. "Ethan, do you mind dropping me on Prince Street? I have to pick up some vitamins the doctor prescribed, and there's a pharmacy there." He frowned, but it was a mild complaint. My treatment was sacred. "Sure. Want me to wait?" "No, no, honey. You go to the office. I'll grab a cab later. I need to walk a bit." To think. He accepted with a distracted gesture, already thinking about his next email, his next call with Chloe. He dropped me at the corner. I waited until the black Mercedes was lost in traffic. Then, with quick steps that had nothing to do with the slow gait of the depressed Eleanor, I crossed 2 streets and entered the commercial diner. Frank and Jessica were already at the back booth, the usual one. In front of them, 2 black coffees and a brown folder. "Any tale?" I asked, sitting down. The waiter, an older man who knew us by now, nodded toward the door. We were clean. "Nothing. Your husband was lost in his own world," Frank said dryly. "We have something." He pushed the folder toward me. Inside were blurry photos taken with a telephoto lens. Ethan and Chloe leaving a discreet building on Wall Street. Not their office, it was a law firm. In another, they were signing a paper at a table visible through a window. "What is it?" I asked, though I already suspected. "A capital increase," Jessica said, her fingers tracing a document from Atlantic Investments. "The 2 of them have created a new class of privileged shares and have divided them up using the profits from the Chinese contract. Formally, it's legal, but it dilutes any residual stake you might have. Eleanor, it cuts you out completely. I was already out," I said. But I felt a prick of anger. It was another layer of his contempt. "Yes, but this is different," Jessica continued. "This is preparation. They're cleaning up the company, turning it into something just for the 2 of them before. Whatever they're planning, a divorce, a sale, a new investment, they're shielding themselves." Frank pointed to another photo. "And there's more. Look." The next image was of a bank, a Santander branch, Ethan alone talking to a manager. It's not his usual bank. I asked around. It's for a line of credit, a big one using the Greenwich House as collateral. The air got stuck in my lungs. Our house. The one he had put in my name too. The one that, according to our long-ago verbal agreement, was Valentina's nest. Can he do that? He has the deed. You signed power of attorney years ago, remember? So he could manage things with agility. Jessica's tone was neutral, but her eyes glittered with contained fury. "He's tying up loose ends, getting liquidity probably to buy your silence in the divorce or to invest with his lover. He's turning everything into debt or untouchable assets." I looked at the photos of Ethan smiling confident with Chloe on his arm. They were building their future on the foundations of my past. The rage from 2 years ago, the one I had turned to ice, threatened to melt into pure hatred. I took a deep breath. "The Luxembourg loan?" I asked, my voice regaining its coldness. "Ready," Jessica said, pulling out another document. "Approved." It's a line of credit in your name guaranteed by the assets of the Luxembourg company. A lot of money, Eleanor. It will appear as a stratospheric personal debt. When it's discovered at the right moment, it will look like you took out a desperate loan or that your husband took it out in your name without your knowledge. The confusion will be enormous. And the Andorra account? I asked Frank. Active. I've gotten the statements for the last 3 months. He passed me some sheets with figures. Here transfers from Atlantic Investments to Chloe's personal account, then from Chloe's account to Ethan's personal account, and from there, payments to phantom suppliers, a condo in the Catskills, and large cash withdrawals. They're pulling the money out. Eleanor, you found the tip of the iceberg 2 years ago. Now they're taking the whole thing. It all fit. His rush for the divorce, his generous offer to take everything. It wasn't generosity, it was housekeeping. He wanted to keep the clean assets, the sanitized company, the house with a new mortgage, and leave all the rot, the hidden debts, the ghost accounts as a poisoned gift for me. Or more likely, have it all blow up after the divorce, splashing onto me, the ex-wife. I smiled. It was a smile without warmth that made Frank nod, almost with pride. So we have everything, I said. Almost, Jessica corrected. We need the masterstroke, something that ties all his actions to an undeniable crime. So far, it's his word against yours on many things. Tax fraud, misappropriation. They're hard to prove without a confession or a major mistake. He's arrogant, not stupid, I murmured. They're all stupid when they think they've won, Frank muttered. And he's about to feel very victorious. That's when it occurred to me. The idea arrived complete, cold, and perfect. There's a meeting, I said, next week with the Chinese investors to sign the final contract. Ethan is obsessed. He says it's at the Plaza Hotel, a big event. Frank and Jessica looked at me expectantly. I need to be there, I continued. Not at the meeting in the hotel. I need something to happen, something that forces him to make a stupid decision with Chloe in front of people, something we can record. Jessica rolled her eyes. Eleanor, this isn't a movie. We can't stage a scandal. We don't have to stage it, I said, my plan taking shape. We just have to encourage it. Ethan is nervous about the Chinese. They're very formal. They value loyalty, family. Any rumor of marital problems, of instability, could ruin everything. A light of understanding began to shine in Frank's eyes. Are you thinking of a leak? Something like that. An anonymous call to the Chinese delegation's office, warning that Mr. Hayes might have personal problems affecting his reliability. A messy affair, for example, and possible financial irregularities in his company. Jessica whistled softly. That's risky. If they investigate and find nothing, they'll back off anyway, and Ethan will be on high alert. But if they find something, even a faint, rotten smell, Frank said thoughtfully, the Chinese are cautious. They'll withdraw the offer or demand impossible guarantees. Ethan will panic. And when a guy like him panics, he does stupid things. Like moving money in a hurry or pressuring his partner to take risks. I looked at them both. I don't want the Chinese deal to collapse. Not yet. I want it to be on the verge of collapsing enough for him to panic and make a mistake. A recordable mistake. There was a long silence. The waiter refilled our water glasses. I can make that call, Frank said finally, from a secure location with a profile that can't be traced. But the content I need specifics, something that sounds truthful but isn't a direct accusation. The Swiss consulting firm, I said immediately, the one from the invoice I signed, Helvetic Consulting Group. Frank, do you have proof it doesn't exist? A slow smile spread across his face. A picture of its office in Zurich. It's a mail drop. And the director is a retired actor. I have the photos. Perfect. The call warns that Atlantic Investments uses phantom suppliers. Mention that name. That's verifiable. and then in passing mention that Mr. Hayes is having an affair with his partner Ms. Vidal, which could pose a conflict of interest. I leaned forward. It's not an accusation, it's a well-wisher's warning. Jessica nodded slowly. It could work. If the Chinese do their own minimal due diligence, they'll find Elbetic is a ghost. That will sow doubt, and doubt in a multi-million-dollar deal is a lead weight. Then we do it, I said. There's a problem, Frank said. The location. We need to have Ethan and Chloe under surveillance at that moment to capture their reaction. And you, Eleanor, can't be nearby. You'd be the immediate suspect. I thought quickly. The plaza has an old bar. The Oak Room, quiet. I could be there, supposedly having tea with an old college friend. Something plausible. Far from the meeting room, but inside the hotel. You, Frank, can be nearby with a device. If there's shouting, if there's an argument. Too unpredictable, Jessica said. We need something more secure. Something that guarantees they talk, that we can hear them. Her car, I said suddenly. He has that new Mercedes. With the hands-free you could. Frank shook his head. Too difficult and risky. No, but her phone. Chloe is less careful. If we can get her to talk to him on her phone in a moment of tension from a public place, a place we choose. I completed feeling the plan click into place. The hotel's parking garage is underground. Coverage is sometimes bad. People use the car's hands-free. If there's a heated argument and she calls him from her car in the garage, it could work, Frank conceded. I need access to her phone for just 5 minutes to install something very simple. That's easier, I said, remembering something. There's a supplier dinner next week they're both going to. Chloe always leaves her purse in the coat check when she goes to the restroom. She's very careless. Frank's eyes gleamed. Give me the date, time and place. I gave it to him. The dinner was at the Financial Club, a place I knew well. I'll do it, Frank said. The call to the Chinese and the software on the lover's phone. We'll capture the conversation if it happens. It will happen, I said with a certainty I didn't entirely feel. Under pressure, he'll call her or she'll call him. They'll accuse each other, demand explanations. Greed and fear are very talkative. Jessica closed her folder. Meanwhile, I'll continue with the money trail in Andorra and prepare the papers for the signing. You have to sign away your marital assets with the utmost naturalness. Mark, your official lawyer, is already preparing the drafts. He thinks it's a tragedy. He's trying to find clauses to protect something, anything. Let him try, I said. His desperation will lend credibility to my surrender. We paid our checks separately. I walked out onto the street. The afternoon light hit my face. I took a deep breath. The mask of the tired, depressed woman settled back onto my features. I lowered my shoulders. The glint of determination in my eyes faded, replaced by a fog of weariness. When I got home, Ethan was already there, talking on the phone in his study. Yes, everything's under control. Don't worry, it's just a matter of time. He hung up and smiled at me. A wide, satisfied smile. Everything okay, honey? Yes, Ethan. Just a little tired, that's all. I went to him and let him kiss my forehead. His smell of expensive cologne and lies was almost palpable. Get some rest. Soon everything will be easier, you'll see. His hand caressed my shoulder, a gesture of ownership. I know, I whispered, looking into his eyes. Soon everything will be much easier. And for the first time, I wasn't lying. The family dinner was a monthly torment, a tradition imposed by my mother-in-law Carol in her Park Avenue apartment. Baccarat crystal inherited silver, and a silence that weighed more than the imported charcuterie. Ethan, seated at the head of the table, was detailing the virtues of the new Swiss boarding school he wanted to send Valentina to. It's a unique opportunity, Mother. Bilingual networking from the cradle. She has to be prepared for the world that's coming. My daughter beside me stirred her noodle soup with a fork, her eyes fixed on the plate. She was 11 and had been quiet, withdrawn for months. The tension at home was a wall that she, with her animal-like sensitivity, perceived perfectly. "Sounds very expensive, Ethan," Carol commented with that tone of false concern she mastered so well. Her eyes, sharp as a bird's, shifted from her son to me. "But of course, with how well everything is going for you now, right, Eleanor?" The question was a poisoned dart. She knew I didn't work, that I lived off her son, the prince. "Yes, Ethan is doing very well," I murmured without looking up. I had stopped trying to have a real conversation with her months ago. It was just theatre like everything else now. "Of course I'm doing well," Ethan said, refilling his wineglass. "And that's why I want the best for Valentina, so she never lacks for anything." He placed a hand over mine on the table, a cold, calculated gesture. To his mother, he must have looked like a protective husband. To me, it was the mark of his ownership. "That's my commitment, isn't it, Eleanor? Whatever happens, our daughter will always be safe, always provided for. That's the only thing that matters." There was the phrase, the one I had been waiting for weeks. Whatever happens. A conditional future full of empty promises. I felt the tiny, hard weight of the phone in my skirt pocket. A different phone from my own, a cheap prepaid model. The recording app had been open since we sat down at the table. A small nudge with my elbow against my side had activated it. "It's a relief to hear you say that, Ethan," I said, raising my gaze to his. I let my eyes moisten slightly. The reflection of the candlelight did the rest. I looked moved. "With everything that's happened, to know that Valentina is your priority, that gives me peace." My voice trembled just enough. He squeezed my hand. "She always has been, honey. You know that." His smile was magnanimous, like a man bestowing blessings. "We'll sign whatever's necessary. A trust, an insurance policy, whatever. She's our blood, the only pure thing in this whole mess." Carol snorted a dry sound. "Well, that's the least you can do. The child isn't to blame for the adult's problems." Her gaze swept over me, evaluative, dismissive. "Though sometimes the children pay for the broken dishes, especially when the parents don't know how to fix their affairs." The blow was direct, clear. To her, the problem was me. My lack of adaptation, my depression, my inability to be the brilliant wife her successful son deserved. The divorce in her mind was undoubtedly my fault, my failure. "Affairs are fixed as best one can." "Carol," I said, keeping my voice low, submissive. "Sometimes the simplest thing is to let go, to not do more harm." "Letting go is for the weak," she retorted sharply. "The Hayes don't let go of what's ours. We fight." She looked at her son with fierce pride. "That's why we are where we are." Ethan seemed uncomfortable for just a moment. He didn't like the confrontational tone. Not here, not now, when he had everything so carefully orchestrated. "Mother, please, this isn't the time. Eleanor is making a great effort, and Valentina is the priority. As I've told you, there will be no battles, just an orderly transition." His gaze fell on me, pleading, or pretending to plead. "Complicity, right, Ellie? An orderly transition," I repeated like an echo. I made a slight gesture as if to dab an imaginary tear with my napkin, and with the same movement under the table, I pressed the phone's button to stop the recording. I had his voice clear, promising security for Valentina. Whatever happens, it was gold. In a custody battle, those words spoken so serenely could be used to show his paternal intentions, or to show his hypocrisy when everything came crashing down. The dinner continued, an ordeal of banalities. Carol talked about the merits of her friends, how expensive everything was, the importance of belonging to the right circles. I nodded absently while my mind replayed the recording. The quality was good, no background noise, his promise clear as crystal. At the end, while the maid was clearing the table, Carol motioned me with her head toward the living room. Eleanor, come help me with Diego's communion photo album. I want to show Valentina how handsome her father was. It was an order, not a request. Valentina looked at me with pleading eyes. She didn't want to be left alone with her father, who was starting to check his phone with a distracted expression. Go with your grandmother, honey, I told her, forcing a smile. I'll be there in a moment. Carol was already sitting on the velvet sofa, the huge leather-bound album on her lap. When I sat down next to her, the smell of mothballs and stale perfume enveloped me. No need to pretend with me, my dear, she said without looking at the photos. Her voice was low, harsh. I know you're up to something. My heart gave a violent jolt. She knew. Oh, had there been something in my attitude? Frank Jessica. I forced a laugh, a weak, strained sound. Up to something, Carol, I don't know what you're talking about. Shut up, she cut in sharply. She finally looked at me. Her eyes, a pale, icy blue, pierced me. I'm not stupid. I've seen women like you before, docile on the outside, vipers on the inside. My son is a man, and like all of them, an idiot. He thinks he can fix everything with money and promises. He thinks you're a scared little sheep he can lock in a new, prettier pen. She turned a page in the album showing a young Ethan in a school uniform smiling. But I know you. I've known you since the day you walked into this house with that shy smile and those eyes that saw everything. You're not giving up. You're planning something dirty. The frankness was a gut punch. There was no contempt in her voice now, but a kind of weary, resentful respect. I took a deep breath, searching for my mask of a tired woman. I'm not planning anything, Carol. I just want peace for myself and for Valentina. Ethan can have everything. I don't want to fight. Lies, she spat, lowering her voice even more. Nobody gives up everything. It's unnatural, unless what you want isn't what you're giving up. She stared at me. What is it, money in a hidden account? Evidence to blackmail him with later. A lover waiting for you with open arms. I had to bite my tongue to keep from laughing. A lover was the least of it. I have none of that, I said, and this time my voice sounded true because it was. What I want Ethan can't give me, nor can you. What? She asked, with genuine curiosity mixed with irritation. Respect, I said simply. I don't want his money or his house or his last name. I want him to look at me and not see a piece of furniture or a problem or a tarnished trophy. I want him to give me back the years I've dedicated to being his shadow. And since that's impossible, I'll settle for the only thing that was never his, my silence and my absence. Carol watched me in silence for what seemed like an eternity. Then she smiled. It wasn't a pleasant smile. It was the smile of someone who has just understood the rules of a dangerous game. You underestimate yourself, Eleanor. And you underestimate my son. You think your silence is worth something. The silence of losers is worth nothing. Only the noise of winners matters. Maybe I don't want to win, I said. Maybe I just want him to lose. The words once spoken hung in the air, thick with perfume and nostalgia. Carol didn't seem surprised. She nodded slowly. That's more honest. But you're mistaken about the enemy. My son is a vain fool, yes. But he's not alone. He has that bitch Chloe, and he has his ambitions. And ambitions are a harder shield than hate. Dear, I said. That's why I'm not fighting his ambition. I'm letting it grow like a tumor. For the first time, I saw something like a flash of admiration in her eyes. Then it was gone, replaced by the usual coldness. You'll hurt Valentina. Whatever you're planning, she'll get hurt. She's already hurt Carol. Hurt Stitzi, I whispered. And the pain of that truth cut my breath. She's hurt every time her father promises her a trip and leaves with her. Every time he looks at her and doesn't see her. At least I'm going to make sure the wound doesn't get infected, that she doesn't grow up with lies. She stood up, closing the photo album with a sharp thud. I'm not going to help you, but I'm not going to stand in your way. My son has made his decisions as you have made yours. I'll just tell you one thing, Eleanor. She came closer, and her voice was a thread of ice. If you hurt my granddaughter, if you give her a single scratch, I will forget you are her mother, and then you will see what a real war is. Not one of lawyers and papers, one of women. She looked at me defiantly, waiting for my reaction. Fear, perhaps. Submission. But I was past fear. I had none left. I held her gaze. Valentina is my daughter, the only thing that matters to me in this world. Everything I do is for her, so that one day she won't have to sit at a table and smile at a man who despises her, while her mother-in-law reminds her how little she's worth. Carol blinked. A grimace of something that could have been pain or rage or both contorted her perfectly painted mouth. Without another word, she turned and left the living room, leaving me alone with the ghost of her son as a boy smiling from the abandoned album on the sofa. I trembled, a deep tremor that came from my gut. The confrontation had been tougher than expected. She knew, or at least she suspected. It didn't matter. She had no proof, only instinct. And her warning about Valentina shook me, but it didn't make me waver. On the contrary, it was a reminder that I was alone, that I could only trust myself, my plan, my small network of loyal allies. I went out into the hallway. Ethan was at the entrance putting on his coat. Ready, Valentina's already in the car. He seemed to be in a good mood, oblivious to the nuclear exchange that had just taken place in the living room. Yes, ready? I said, grabbing my purse. The phone with the recording felt as heavy as a brick. In the elevator, in the oppressive silence, Ethan said without looking at me, Mom can be blunt, but deep down she wants what's best for the family. Of course, I said, watching the numbers descend. What's best? Driving back home with Valentina dozing in the back seat, Ethan spoke euphoric. I've been thinking that Swiss school is an investment, but we need to make sure she has enough assets. I'm going to structure a trust with the Upper East Side penthouse in her name so no one can touch it. He shot me a quick glance. It was his way of telling me that even if I had nothing, our daughter would. A bone to chew on. Arms disguised as paternal love. That's an excellent idea, Ethan, I said in a neutral voice. Inside, a cold smile spread. Yes, structure that trust. Tie that penthouse, which will soon be worthless to your daughter's future. That way, when everything collapses, your gift will be just a pile of debts and broken promises. I knew you'd understand, he said, satisfied. Everything's going to be fine. You'll see, Ellie. You're going to start a new, quieter life. No worries. I hope so, I whispered, looking out the window at the city sliding by dark and full of lights. A new life, I thought. Yes, but not the one you imagine. When we arrived, I put Valentina to bed. I watched her sleep, her angelic face illuminated by the small bedside lamp. I'm sorry, my love, I murmured, kissing her forehead. But when you wake up, the world will be a safer place for you. I promise. I left her room and locked myself in the bathroom. I took out the cheap phone, connected the headphones, and played the recording. Whatever happens, our daughter will always be safe, always provided for. That's the only thing that matters. Ethan's voice, warm, convincing, paternal, perfect. I sent the file to an encrypted account Frank had set up. Then I deleted the history. A minute later, my main phone vibrated. A message from an unknown number. It was Frank. It just said, "Received, clear as water, good catch." And below it, another message from Jessica. "Mark is ready. Appointment at the notary's Thursday at 10. Signing of the waiver of assets. Don't be late and don't get nervous." Thursday, in 48 hours. The first official signing the gateway to his trap and to mine. I looked at myself in the mirror. The eyes that stared back were no longer those of the scared woman from 2 years ago. They were the eyes of someone who had planted a seed in the poisoned soil of her marriage. And now, as the confident gardener watered that soil, believing flowers would grow, the plant of vengeance was slowly beginning to break through the earth, sharpening its thorns, waiting for the moment to bloom. Mark, my lawyer, had the face of a man who has just witnessed a shipwreck and can do nothing to stop it. His office, modern and expensive, on the Avenue of the Americas, smelled of strong coffee and desperation. In front of him, the pages of the express divorce agreement lay like a death sentence. "Eleanor, for the love of God, you have to listen to me." His voice was a harsh whisper loaded with frustration. "This isn't an agreement, it's financial suicide. You're giving up the house, the 2 investment properties, your share of the marital assets, alimony, everything in exchange for what shared custody that he offers you as a favor. It's a mockery." I settled into the chair, my hands calm on my purse. The mask of the defeated woman was now my official uniform. "It's not a favor, Mark. It's what's best for Valentina. She needs her father. Valentina needs a mother who doesn't live in a studio apartment because she's given away her fortune," he almost shouted. He ran a hand through his hair. "Look, I understand you're upset that this is all too much. But don't make decisions now. Let me fight for you. We have arguments, those downturns he talks about. We've gotten expert reports that contextualize them, that show it was a temporary situation aggravated by the environment." "No," I said softly, but with a firmness that made him fall silent. "I don't want to fight. I don't want Valentina to live through years of lawsuits, courthouse visits, of seeing us tear each other apart. Ethan has resources. I have peace. That is my choice." Mark looked at me as if he didn't recognize me, and in a way he was right. The Eleanor who had walked into his office 2 months ago with swollen eyes and a trembling voice had been a character. This one, the one in front of him, was another, calmer, more dangerous. "Is it blackmail?" he asked, lowering his voice. "Is he threatening you with something? With Valentina? Because if so, this is completely illegal. We can—" "He's not threatening me with anything," I interrupted. "It's my decision, free and conscious." I raised my gaze and faced him. "Mark, you've been very kind. You've done your job. But your job now is to draft the waiver as I ask and accompany me to sign it. Nothing more." He sank into his chair, defeated. "We sign tomorrow at the notary's, at 10. He and his lawyer, Ricardo, already have their copy. They're ecstatic." He pronounced the last word with disgust. "Good," I said, getting up. "Then until tomorrow. Eleanor," he said when my hand was on the doorknob. His voice sounded tired old. "Are you sure you know what you're doing?" I turned and smiled at him. It was a sad, resigned smile, perfectly rehearsed. "It's the only thing I've been sure of in a long time, Mark." I walked out onto the street. The Madrid sunlight was harsh, bright. I took a deep breath. The air smelled of traffic and freedom. I took out the cheap phone and dialed. Jessica answered on the first ring. "Done." Done. He thinks I'm either crazy or terrified. Perfect. That's how it should be. "Do you have the recording from dinner?" "Yes. I sent it to Frank. The part where he promises Valentina will be safe. Whatever happens is good. It's excellent. It shows intent to provide, which helps with the custody issue later, but also his arrogance, as if he's the only one capable of providing security. She paused. I heard the tapping of a keyboard on the other end. The DA's file is ready. I'll deliver it an hour after tomorrow's signing. Not before. I don't want any leaks. It has everything from Andorra, the fake invoices, the transfers. Everything. With an executive summary even a child could understand. Ethan and his friend have been sloppy. They think money in tax havens is invisible. It's only invisible if no one knows where to look. And we've put a giant flag on it for them. Her tone was one of pure professional satisfaction. Mark doesn't suspect anything about me, does he? Not in his wildest dreams. To him, you're the lawyer friend helping me with the trauma. He pities you. Good. Tomorrow at 10 at the notary's on Goya Street. Sign, smile, and leave. Don't look back. The notary's office was cold, impersonal. It smelled of old paper and polished wood. Ethan was already there with his lawyer Ricardo, a man of 150 pounds in a tailored suit and a shark smile that didn't reach his eyes. He greeted me with a nod that bordered on condescension. Eleanor, Ethan said, approaching. He seemed relaxed, even happy. He was wearing a new suit. Ready to start fresh. His voice was jovial, but victory shone in his eyes. Ready, I said in a small voice. Mark at my side looked like he was about to have a heart attack. His jaw was clenched. The notary, a serious man with precise gestures, had us sit. He read the terms of the agreement aloud. Each word sounded like a whip crack. Waiver of all participation in the community property. Waiver of the family home in Greenwich. Waiver of the penthouse on the Upper East Side. Waiver of any rights to Atlantic Investments, LLC. Waiver of investment funds, joint bank accounts, pension plans. In exchange, shared custody with a visitation schedule to be agreed upon, which in practice meant Valentina would live with him, and I would see her on alternate weekends, and a symbolic, ridiculous compensatory alimony that he had put on the table as a gesture of generosity. It was a legal, impeccable, and total stripping of assets. Do you understand, Ms. Eleanor Hayes, the scope of what you are signing? The notary asked, looking at me over his glasses. You are renouncing practically the entire marital estate. I understand, I said, and my voice sounded clear calm in the silence of the room. You are doing so freely and voluntarily without any coercion. I am doing so freely and voluntarily. The words tasted like ash, but I uttered them without hesitation. Ethan suppressed a smile. Ricardo nodded, satisfied. I signed my name Eleanor at the bottom of each page. My signature was fluid, the same one I had stamped on so many documents that had betrayed me. Mark signed as a witness with a gesture of profound bitterness. When it was Ethan's turn, his signature was quick, energetic, a triumphant scrawl. When he finished, he put down the pen and took a deep breath, as if a great weight had been lifted from his shoulders. He looked at me, and for a second I thought I saw something like pity in his eyes. Then it disappeared, drowned by relief. It's for the best, Ellie, he murmured, placing a hand on mine. I withdrew it gently. Yes, Ethan, it's for the best. We walked out onto the street. The sun was the same, but the world was different. Or maybe I was. Well, Ethan said, rubbing his hands together, this was all more civilized than I expected. Ricardo, I'll see you later to finalize the last details of the company. Of course, Ethan. Ricardo gave me a final, almost pitying glance. Ms. Hayes, good luck. They walked away, the two of them talking in low voices, laughing. Two men who had won. Mark stood beside me, mute. Finally, he said, "I don't know what you're doing, Eleanor, but I hope you know how to swim." "I do, Mark. Thank you for everything." I held out my hand. He shook it sadly and left. When I was alone, I took out my phone. I sent a single character message to Jessica S. for signed. The reply came instantly. Received. Package goes out in half an hour. I looked to where Ethan and Ricardo had disappeared. I felt something strange. Not sadness, not anger. It was emptiness. A vast, clean emptiness, ready to be filled with something new. I had signed my public defeat, and in doing so, I had triggered the first piece of my revenge. While I was taking a taxi to nowhere in particular, Jessica Montes was entering a functional building on San Bernardo Street. She carried a thick grey file. At the reception desk, she showed her lawyer's ID and asked to speak to the on-duty prosecutor for the Economic Crimes Division. The wait was short. She was led to a small meeting room with a formica table and plastic chairs. The prosecutor was a young, tired-looking man named David Chen. "Come in, Ms. Montes. How can I help you?" Jessica placed the file on the table. "I have information here regarding a case of suspected tax fraud, misappropriation of funds, document forgery, and possible money laundering. It's complex, but the facts are quite clear." Her voice was cold professional, as if she were talking about any other case. Chen opened the file. He glanced at the first pages where an executive summary detailed the names Ethan Hayes and Atlantic Investments, LLC. Then the bank movements from Andorra, the invoices from Helvetic Consulting Group, with the address of a mail drop in Zurich. The screenshots of emails with their intimate conversations and plans to divert funds. Photocopies of forged signatures. A flowchart of the network of accounts. The silence in the room was total, broken only by the slight rustle of paper. The prosecutor's face changed. The weariness gave way to intense, alert attention. "This is very complete," he said at last, looking up. "And your client, the complainant?" "My client," Jessica said. Choosing her words carefully, is a collateral victim. His spouse, a woman who until today has been under severe emotional and financial pressure. Today she signed a divorce agreement in which she renounces her entire estate, possibly induced by a state of vulnerability. But before doing so, and fearing for her future and that of her daughter, she gathered this evidence. She now feels safe enough to present it. Chen nodded slowly. The story was believable, and fit a pattern he saw often the weaker spouse, who, seeing everything crumble, decides to air the dirty laundry. What does she want? Protection, a plea deal? "My client asks for nothing for herself," Jessica said, her tone now hard as steel. "She only asks that justice be served, that an investigation be launched, that any remaining assets be secured for the support of her minor daughter. She has renounced everything. But her daughter should not pay the consequences for her father's crimes." It was the masterstroke. The self-sacrificing mother had concerned only for her daughter. Chen took the bait. "I understand," he said, closing the file. "This looks like it could be big. I'll need a statement from your client, and we'll have to move quickly before they find out and start shielding assets or destroying evidence." "My client is at your disposal whenever necessary," Jessica said. "But I urge discretion. Mr. Hayes is an influential person, and at this moment, he believes he has emerged victorious from everything. Any leak could alert him." An almost imperceptible smile appeared on the prosecutor's lips. "Don't worry. In this department, we know how to be discreet, and we like surprises." He stood up. "We'll be in touch. And thank you. We don't always get information so well packaged." Jessica also stood up. "It's my job, Mr. Prosecutor. Good day." She left the building. The midday sun blinded her for a moment. She took out her phone and wrote a message. Not to me, to Frank. Package delivered. Recipient seemed very interested, awaiting confirmation of receipt. Frank's message arrived 10 minutes later while I was sitting on a bench in Central Park, watching the ducks without seeing them. Confirmed. Recipient has opened the package. Digestion has begun. I smiled. A small private smile. The package was in the belly of the beast. Justice was slow, but it was sure, and it was hungry. My main phone vibrated. It was Ethan. I hesitated for a second before answering. Yeah. Ellie? It's me. His voice sounded strangely jovial. Just to say that, well, everything was very civilized, and to remind you that Valentina is staying with me tonight as we agreed. I'll pick her up from school. All right, I said in a neutral voice. And Ellie, don't hesitate to ask for help if you need it for an apartment or whatever. It was the finishing touch, the cherry on top of his feigned generosity. Thanks, Ethan. You're very kind. I hung up. I looked at the lake. The water was still like glass. But underneath, in the depths, things were already moving. The net was closing slowly, silently. He was celebrating his victory, toasting with Ricardo, and probably later with Chloe, to his new, unencumbered future, to his intact fortune, to his daughter under his control. He didn't know that with the same ink of his triumph, he had just signed the beginning of his end. He thought he had taken everything from me, but he had only been left with the shell. The seed, the poisonous living seed, was already planted and beginning to take root. The courtroom smelled of polished wood and anxiety, a stale odor that stuck to the roof of your mouth. Eleanor sat on the bench reserved for the plaintiff, although in reality I felt like the accused. Mark beside me nervously shuffled papers. On the other side, Ethan, impeccable, in a navy blue suit, exchanged a few quiet words with Ricardo. His posture was relaxed, almost arrogant. He smiled when he saw me looking at him. A smile of pity. The judge, a man with a long face and thin-rimmed glasses, entered, and we all stood. With a gesture, he told us to sit. He began to read the case file aloud, a legal gibberish that summarized my renunciation of everything and Ethan's custody proposal. His voice was monotonous, tired. Ms. Eleanor Hayes, he said, looking up at me. It is noted in a public deed your renunciation of the entire marital estate. Do you maintain this intention? All eyes were on me. Ethan's confident, Mark's pleading for a miracle, the judge's expressionless. I took a deep breath, feeling the weight of the cheap phone, my talisman, in my jacket pocket. Yes, Your Honor, I do. The judge jotted something down. Are you aware that this renunciation is in practical terms total and irrevocable? That you will not be able to claim assets rights or compensation in the future, except for the symbolic alimony established here? I am, Your Honor. Mark let out a choked sound, a sigh of defeat. The judge nodded and turned to Ethan. Mr. Ethan Hayes, Ms. Eleanor alleges that you have exerted pressure on her, taking advantage of a state of emotional vulnerability. What do you have to say about that? Ethan adopted an expression of painful sincerity. He leaned forward slightly, his hands clasped on the table. Your Honor, with all due respect, that is a false accusation. My wife Eleanor has been through a difficult time. I acknowledge that. We have tried to help her. I have been by her side. But her decision to renounce everything was her own, freely made. In fact, he added, lowering his voice as if sharing a confidence, I offered her a more balanced agreement. She rejected it. She said she didn't want anything that would remind her of our failure. She just wanted peace and our daughter nearby. That's why I accepted the shared custody with the living arrangement I proposed to give Valentina the stability that her mother in her current state cannot consistently provide. It was a perfect speech, conciliatory, paternal, full of feigned concern. Even the judge seemed slightly moved. Ricardo nodded gravely. "Ms. Eleanor, do you have anything to add?" the judge asked. I looked at Ethan, at his eyes, which shone with the certainty of one who has already won. I let my own gaze fill with the resigned sadness I had practiced so much. "No, Your Honor. I just want this to be over. For my daughter's sake." The judge tapped a pencil lightly on the desk. "I understand. These are painful decisions. I see that despite the financial disparity, there is clear consent. Therefore, I will proceed to validate the agreement. Custody of the minor Valentina Hayes is awarded to the father, Mr. Ethan Hayes, with a visitation schedule for the mother of alternate weekends and half of school holidays. The renunciation of marital assets is approved under the terms of the deed. The divorce is decreed." The bang of the small dry gavel echoed in the room like a gunshot. It was the official end. Ethan couldn't contain a broad smile of total relief. Ricardo clapped him on the shoulder. Mark slumped in his chair, running a hand over his face. The judge stood and left. The formality was over. We stood up. Ethan approached me, extending his hand, a final gesture of chivalry. "Thank you, Ellie, for making everything so easy." His voice was warm, victorious. I didn't take his hand. I just looked at it, then at his eyes. "Take care of our daughter, Ethan. Really." My words sounded like a farewell, a warning. "Of course," he said, withdrawing his hand unfazed. "She's my priority." He turned and headed for the exit, followed by Ricardo. It was then that Ricardo, almost at the door, turned back. He didn't look at me. He looked at Mark. And on his face, the expression of triumph momentarily faded, replaced by a flash of confusion, of suspicion. His small, penetrating eyes darted from Mark's defeated posture to me, still and dry. His sharp, cynical mind must have been doing the math. Something wasn't right. Mark's defeat was too real, too visceral, and my resignation was too calm. It wasn't the rage of a dispossessed woman, nor hysteria. It was a strange, almost unsettling placidity. Our eyes met for a fraction of a second. In Ricardo's, there was a question. In mine, nothing, just a flat void. He frowned slightly, as if trying to decipher a code. Then Ethan called him from the hallway. "Ricardo, let's go. We have a celebration to get to." Ricardo gave me one last, strangely suspicious look and left. Mark exhaled a long sigh. "Well, that's it. You've done it. You've lost everything." His tone was bitter. "Not everything, Mark," I said, picking up my purse. "Thank you for everything, really." I walked out of the courtroom. The hallway was cold marble. In the distance, I saw the backs of Ethan and Ricardo getting into the elevator. Ethan was laughing, a clear laugh that echoed in the empty space. The elevator doors closed, swallowing his triumph. I stood there alone for a moment. Then I took out the cheap phone. A message from Jessica. "How did it go?" I texted back. "Divorce decreed. All according to plan." Ricardo looked at me funny. He suspects. The reply came instantly. "Doesn't matter. It's too late. The search warrant was signed yesterday, first thing tomorrow morning." And a shiver, this time of pure anticipation, ran down my spine. I closed my eyes. Tomorrow. As I walked down the courthouse steps, my main phone rang. It was Ethan. I hesitated but answered. "Yeah. Ellie. I just wanted to say, don't worry about Valentina. She's fine. She's staying with me tonight. Tomorrow, if you want, you can come pick her up for the weekend. although on second thought, maybe it's too soon. Let me get her settled. Okay? His voice was sweet, but the intention was clear. Push me away, put up barriers, get her used to her new life without me. Whatever you think is best, Ethan, I said weakly. You're very understanding, really. Well, I'll leave you with a kiss. He hung up. A kiss. The final hypocrisy. I walked out onto the street. The daylight hit me full on. New York buzzed around me, oblivious to my drama. I went into a nearby coffee shop, ordered a coffee, and sat at a table in the back. I needed to think, or rather I needed not to think. The cheap phone vibrated again. This time it was Frank. Yeah. Everything good on your end? His voice was rough, but there was a hint of satisfaction. Yes. Signed and sealed. He thinks he's the king of the world. Well, let him enjoy his reign. It's going to be short. He paused. Listen, the search warrant is solid. They're going into his office, his girlfriend's office, and pulling records from the banks. They already have the Andorra stuff. And there's more. More than the loan, your loan. The one from Luxembourg. It's surfaced. I held my breath. How? Not yet. No, not like that. Relax. It appeared in the system in a casual way. A Spanish bank doing a cross-risk check. Your name pops up associated with a multi-million-dollar credit. It's routine, but if someone's looking like they will be, now they'll see it. And they'll ask questions, a lot of questions. I understood. It was the next piece. The loan in my name, that would look like madness or a scam. And how will they react? First, they'll think it's yours, your debt. Then when they see you haven't touched the money, that it's intact in the Luxembourg company, they'll wonder what it's for. And then when they cross-reference and see your husband has been siphoning funds, they'll think it's part of the plan. Or that you knew, or that it's a monumental mess. The confusion will be maximal, and in the middle of that mess, he's going down. And me. The question came out on its own. They won't accuse me too. You have an alibi. Jessica has prepared everything. The movements of that money predate your diagnosed depression. It will look like a prudent investment you made when you were well. And then when you fell into that state, you forgot. Or that it was your husband's idea and he made you sign. The psychiatric experts we've consulted on the sly support that during that period you were vulnerable and could be manipulated. You're covered, Eleanor, as a victim. I breathed a sigh of relief. Thank you, Frank. Don't thank me. Just be prepared. Tomorrow, when they find out, the sky is going to fall on them. And he will call you. He'll scream, cry, threaten. Don't answer. Or if you do, be the same scared, confused woman you've always been. Don't let him break your character. Now more than ever. I know. Well, I'll be watching. And so will Jessica. Chin up. The worst is over for you. For him, it's just beginning. I hung up. I drank a sip of the now cold coffee. He was right. The hardest part, enduring, pretending, yielding, was over. Now the collapse began. His collapse. I paid for the coffee and went back out to the street. I had nowhere to go. My house was no longer mine. My daughter was with him. I got into a taxi and gave the address of a small apartment I had secretly rented months ago, paid for with money from the Panama account, a nondescript place in a normal neighborhood. My hideout, my den. As the taxi moved, we passed by a luxury restaurant on Madison Avenue. Through the window, I saw them, Ethan, Ricardo, and Chloe, toasting with champagne, laughing. Chloe, dark-haired, elegant, in a red dress, was laughing at something Ethan said, touching his arm. He was smiling, expansive, the king of his world. The taxi stopped at a red light. I had a perfect view. Ethan raised his glass, said something, and the other two laughed. Then, as if feeling my gaze, he turned his head toward the window. His eyes swept the street blind and moved on. He didn't see me. He couldn't see me. I was already a ghost he had left behind, starving on the roadside of his life. I smiled inside the taxi, a smile that had nothing sad about it. It was hungry. Toast, Ethan, I thought as the taxi started moving. Toast to your new life. Because tomorrow when you wake up, it will have turned into a nightmare. And I, the ghost, will be the only one who knows why. My main phone vibrated. A message from an unknown number. It just said, Operation Aurora, H hour 800. It was Frank, confirming the time of the raid. It was 8 p.m. 12 hours until his world, so carefully built on lies and theft, began to crack. I arrived at my apartment. It was small, clean, impersonal. No pictures, nothing personal, just a bed, a sofa, a kitchen, and a laptop. I sat in front of it and opened an encrypted file. It contained copies of everything: the DA's file, the recordings, the bank movements, my treasure, my insurance. I turned on the television without sound. Mute images of news game shows, other people's lives. I waited. The night would be long, but for the first time in 2 years, I wasn't waiting with fear. I was waiting with the cold patience of justice. My justice. And somewhere in the city, under the same moon, Ethan was laughing, not knowing that his morning would bring a bloody dawn. 7 days after the divorce, Ethan and Chloe occupied the best table at Per Se Caviar Krug Champagne, and the view of Columbus Circle at their feet. He wore a new watch, one of those that costs as much as a car. She wore the red dress from the celebration on Madison Avenue now, with a smile of total ownership. To the new chapter. Ethan toasted, a spark of triumph in his eyes. No baggage, no strings attached. To us, Chloe corrected with an intimate gaze. They clinked glasses. The sound was sharp, fragile. I sent the papers to the Swiss bank, he commented, lowering his voice. The transfer of funds from Andorra, all clean, into the new Luxembourg company, in both our names. She placed a hand on his. And the house, the one in Greenwich. The new mortgage is approved. With the money I pull out, we'll pay off the last debts of the old company and have a huge cushion. Everything is, he smiled broadly, perfect. It was at that moment that 3 men in street clothes but with a stiff, professional demeanor approached their table. They didn't look like waiters. Mr. Ethan Hayes, the one in front asked, showing a badge. NYPD, Economic Crimes Division. Ethan's smile froze. Chloe set her glass on the tablecloth with a click that was too loud. Yes. What's the problem? Ethan's voice still tried to sound authoritative, but there was a thread of tension. We need you and Ms. Chloe Vidal to come with us. For questioning. The agent was young, his gaze impassive. Come with you. You now. This is an outrage. My lawyer. Your lawyer, Mr. Ricardo, has already been notified. He's waiting for you at the precinct on Miguel Angel Street. The agent made a slight gesture. The other 2 men positioned themselves on either side of the table. Please, it's better without a scene. The whole room was watching them. The murmurs ceased. The maitre d' was wringing his hands in the distance. Ethan turned pale. He saw the headlines, the scandal. He felt the floor giving way under his Italian shoes. What am I accused of? He asked, standing up. He was trying to maintain his dignity, but he was a cornered animal. Tax fraud, misappropriation, document forgery, and money laundering. For starters. The agent stepped aside, clearing the way. You have the right to remain silent, and to an attorney, I suggest you use both. The ride in the unmarked car through Manhattan was a silent hell. Chloe cried silently, mascara running down her cheeks. Ethan stared out the window, his mind a whirlwind. How had the Chinese investigated a disgruntled employee? A mistake in Andorra Ricardo was waiting for them at the precinct, his face distraught. Don't say anything. Absolutely nothing. This is a search warrant based on a very detailed anonymous complaint. They've raided your offices, your banks. A complaint, Ethan cut in, grabbing Ricardo by the lapel. From whom? Ricardo gently pried him off. His eyes, normally cold, had a glint of something like panic. That's the question, Ethan. The complaint is from your ex-wife. From Eleanor. The world stopped. The noise of the precinct faded away. What? The word was barely a whisper. Yes. She submitted a dossier to the district attorney's office for economic crimes the same day you signed the divorce. With everything, Ethan. Everything. The Andorra movements, the fake invoices, the emails, the transfers to Chloe's accounts. Everything. Impossible, Ethan gasped. She doesn't know. She's depressed. She doesn't understand anything about. Really? Ricardo's voice was a whip. Depressed. The same woman who signed away everything without blinking, the same one who was so calm in court. Wake up, man. She set a trap for you and you walked right into it all the way. Chloe moaned. That witch. But how the loan? Ethan asked, a new horror dawning in his eyes. The one in Luxembourg, the one for the shell company. Ricardo nodded slowly, bitterly. That's in there too. In her name, a huge credit line. The prosecutors think it's part of the scheme or an asset she hid. But here's the best part. When they started tracing your assets, the ones you thought were yours, they found that most are mortgaged to the hilt or owned by companies with massive debts. The Greenwich house with a new mortgage that exceeds its value. The Upper East Side penthouse used as collateral for a loan you didn't know existed. And the jewel in the crown your company Atlantic Investments is empty. The funds were transferred weeks ago to an account in Liechtenstein in the name of a trust. He paused, dramatically leaning in Valentina's name, and administered by a bank that answers only to the girl's mother, to Eleanor. Ethan leaned against the cold wall. He couldn't breathe. No, it can't be. I control everything. You controlled an empty shell, Ricardo spat. While you thought you were stripping her bare, she was sucking out the marrow. She's been doing it for years. With help, of course. Someone was advising her. Someone good. That detective, Chloe murmured suddenly. Remember Ethan? The one you hired a year ago when you thought you were being followed. You said it was paranoia. Frank. The name emerged like a poison. The old retired detective. Ethan had hired and fired him. He should have stayed with him. He should have bought him. I need to see her, Ethan said, his voice broken. I need to talk to Eleanor now. Not possible, Ricardo said. And even if it were, what would you say to her? She has destroyed you with premeditation and malice and legally. What she did, transferring assets, reporting crimes, it may be vengeful, but much of it is legitimate, or at least hard to prove as illegal. She covered her tracks beautifully. An officer approached. Mr. Hayes, the head of the division, wants to take your statement, and Miss Vidal's, separately. As they led him down a grey hallway, Ethan felt like he was walking over his own corpse. His fortune, his freedom, his reputation, all of it was vanishing. And at the center of the storm, serene and unperturbed, was the image of Eleanor, his wife, his victim, his executioner. In my nondescript apartment, I take Eleanor Hall. Eleanor held the phone. It was Jessica who had called me first. They're in. They picked them up at Per Se with all the fanfare. Her voice sounded tired but satisfied. And the reaction? I asked, looking out the window at the New York night. The one you expected. Disbelief, rage. Ricardo is on the verge of a breakdown. He's seen the file. He knows or suspects that this was planned for a long time. Good. I felt no euphoria, just a vast, clean emptiness, like after a long and strenuous operation. And Valentina, where is she? With the nanny. Ethan left her with her before dinner. I spoke to the girl. I told her to spend the night there, that you would pick her up in the morning. She's scared, but okay. Thank you, Jessica. I took a deep breath. And my part. The loan. It's in the mess as we planned. The prosecutors are more interested in Ethan's network and the money from Andorra. Your loan looks like an extravagance or a maneuver by him. The psychiatric reports we planted help. For now, you are the vulnerable wife who, besides being robbed, was used to take out loans. You're a victim twice over. It plays in your favor. I hung up. A minute later, the main phone rang. It was Ethan. I let it ring once, twice, 3 times. On the 4th, I answered. I said nothing. Eleanor. His voice was a roar, a choked cry of rage and despair. What have you done? What have you done? Ethan. I said, my voice as flat and tired as I could make it. What's wrong? Are you okay? Don't you ask me that question, you daughter of a... He spat. I could hear his ragged, wounded animal breathing. The complaint, the papers, and it was all a lie this whole time. I don't know what you're talking about, Ethan. Agents came to my door too, asking strange things. I'm scared. The lie came out smoothly. Automatic. My armor. You're lying. You must have planned it. You have the money. My money. I don't have any money, Ethan. You took everything. We signed it. Remember. I let a tremor, this one real, from the tension creep into my voice. Please, can I talk to Valentina? A growl of pure fury came from his throat. Valentina. Now you remember her. You used her. This is all a revenge scheme. I'm going to destroy you. I'll take you to jail with me. Ethan, I don't understand anything. You've had too much to drink. We'll talk tomorrow. And I hung up. I was trembling from head to toe, not from fear, from the discharge of adrenaline. I had heard the sound of his world breaking, and it was sweet bitter, and sweet like an ancient poison. The phone rang again. This time it was Ricardo. I hesitated, but answered. He at least would be cold. Eleanor. His voice was a blade. Are you alone? Yes. Listen to me carefully. I'm not going to waste time. I know it was you. I know it. I don't have all the proof, but I will. You moved assets, you made hidden transfers, you used privileged information. What you did to Ethan is a masterpiece of perfidy, but it's illegal. I don't know what you're talking about, Mr. Ricardo. I signed what my husband and you put in front of me. If something was done wrong or secretly, I was the last to know. As always. I stood firm. Jessica had trained me for this. The Luxembourg loan, the shell company, he insisted, trying to catch me in a slip. What, I don't know anything about that. Ethan handled the finances. I just signed where he told me. Like with the invoice for the Swiss consulting firm, remember the one that didn't exist. I dropped the name like a cluster bomb. A mortal silence fell on the other end. I had hit a nerve, as Ethan's lawyer had perhaps turned a blind eye to some things. Or maybe not. But the mention put him in a delicate position. You're very clever, he said at last, and his tone had changed. It was no longer just accusatory. It was respectful. A dark, hate-filled respect. But this isn't over. Your ex-husband is finished. I know that, but you're not going to get out of this unscathed. The scandal will splash onto you and your daughter. My daughter is safe, I said, and this time my voice was steel. Her future is secure far from her father's lies and thefts. That's the only thing that matters to me, Mr. Ricardo. Good night. I hung up before he could respond. I turned off the main phone. The silence in the apartment was absolute. Minutes later, the cheap phone vibrated. Frank. Everything okay? Yes, Ethan and Ricardo called. I know, I listened. He had tapped the line, of course. You did well, especially with Ricardo. He's scared now. And now? I asked, feeling the weight of fatigue suddenly crashing down on me. Now we wait. The legal machine has started. It's slow, but it's unstoppable. He'll spend the night in the precinct. They'll probably request pre-trial detention tomorrow. He has offshore accounts, he's a flight risk. The evidence is overwhelming. And Chloe, she'll sing like a canary. It's all Ethan's fault, according to her. He manipulated her, he forced her. She's cooperating. They'll take her to the women's facility, but with lesser charges. She'll try for a deal. And me, the investigation. They've called you to testify as a witness and victim in a week. Jessica has everything prepared. You're going to be the cheated and financially abused wife who discovered the scheme and collected evidence. The Luxembourg loan will appear as a desperate attempt by Ethan to get more liquidity in your name, using your signature. You, in your state of confusion and pressure, didn't even notice. The psychiatric reports support it. And Carol, my mother-in-law. The question was inevitable. Frank snorted. She's a different breed. She's tried to pull strings called expensive lawyers, but the file is so thick even the sharks are staying away. She went to see Ethan. I don't know what they said, but I heard she snapped something about never underestimating a woman with a wounded pride. It seems like deep down she almost admits it. Almost. It wasn't comfort, but it was justice. Thank you, Frank, for everything. Don't thank me. This was a job and it's been a pleasure. If you need anything else, you know. But I don't think you will. You have Jessica. And you have this. He meant the executed plan. And what will you do? I'm going on a trip. Somewhere with sun and no cell phone. Goodbye, Eleanor. And good luck. I hung up. Another loose end tied up. Another witness gone. I was left alone with the silence of the apartment and the faint sound of my daughter's breathing from the other side of the door. In the afternoon, Jessica arrived. She brought papers, decent coffee, and a tired but genuine smile. We sat at the small kitchen table. "This is for you," she said, sliding an envelope across. "The statements from the Liechtenstein account for Valentina's trust. It's more than you would ever have gotten in a normal divorce. It's clean legal and safe from any seizure related to Ethan's messes." I opened the envelope. The figures danced before my eyes. A fortune. The fortune he had been stealing and that I had patiently been redirecting. And the apartment, the house. The Greenwich house is seized. The bank will foreclose. The penthouse too. Everything in his name will go under. You have nothing in your name, Eleanor. You are officially a woman without assets, which makes you immune. And in practice, an independent woman, thanks to the resources of your daughter's trust, of which you are the administrator. It's elegant and cruel. Fair, I corrected. Jessica nodded. Fair. The meeting with the DA is on Thursday. I'll accompany you. You just have to stick to your story. The story of the woman who woke up from a nightmare and had the courage to act despite her fear. It's not a story, I said, looking at her intently. It's the truth. She held my gaze. I know. That's why it will work. She left at dusk. I made dinner for Valentina and myself. An omelette, a salad, something simple. We ate in silence, but it wasn't an uncomfortable silence. It was the silence of two castaways who have reached a safe shore. "Mum," Valentina said when she finished, "can we put a picture of us here?" "Of course, sweetie. We'll buy a frame tomorrow." She nodded, satisfied. Then she asked, looking at her plate, "And Dad? Can we visit him?" The question hurt, but it was fair. "Yes, when it's allowed. If you want to. I'm not going to stop you. But I want you to know that he may not be the same person you knew. Pride and prison change people." "I know," she said with infinite sadness, "but he's my dad." "Yes," I whispered, "he is." That night, while Valentina slept, I went out onto the small balcony. The air was cool. New York glittered in the distance, indifferent. Over there in a cell, Ethan Hayes was beginning to understand the magnitude of his ruin. Not just financial, but moral, familial. He had lost his empire of lies, his accomplice, and the respect of his daughter. And worst of all, he knew he had been defeated by the woman he had most underestimated. I felt no euphoria. I felt peace. A deep peace excavated with the patience of 2 years of silence and cunning. I had used his own weapons, greed, arrogance, contempt against him. I had let him believe he was winning only to snatch it all away in a single blow when it was too late to react. It wasn't a happy ending. It was a just one. I had saved my daughter from the shipwreck. I had saved myself. And I had given Ethan the most bitter gift, the truth about himself. My main phone vibrated in my pocket. A message from an unknown number. It just said, "It's Ricardo. We need to talk. It's about your daughter." I looked at it. The last attempt of a cornered man to protect another or to get something for himself. I smiled without humor. I turned off the phone. There was no rush. The law was taking its course. I was now following my own course, with my daughter, with my truth, with my life finally in my own hands. The vengeance was over. Justice, too. Now the hard and beautiful part began living. I breathed in the clean night air, went inside, and closed the door to begin.